well, what could food possibly have to do with the brain, right? Most people think, oh, nutrition has something to do with your cholesterol level, or it might have to do with your risk for heart disease, or maybe diabetes, and of course your weight, right? But we don't think about our skin health, the health of our immune system, our brain, our pain management system, our stress hormone levels. We don't think about that all being connected, but it's all connected because
Everyone should have a doctor, dentist, and psychologist. Unfortunately, mental health struggles continue to be a taboo topic in our society. We take our concerns to our family doctors who aren't trained to manage our issues, and we end up eating our emotions. After 20 years of helping people with managing their life stressors, the topics that come up the most in my office are about people not being happy with relationships, their weight, and medications they don't want to take because they don't seem to be helping. About a year and a half ago, I read an article about how the keto diet helped more than 20 treatment resistant people to put their psychiatric problems into remission. And our guest was one of the contributors. Since then, Georgia Ede has written a book and begun to educate health professionals on how to heal the mind with food. I've had the pleasure of taking that course, and it was amazing. I'm extremely excited to have Georgia here with us today because she's going to discuss how we can improve our mental health and therefore improve our life by adjusting the building blocks of our body. Georgia, I want to start off by asking how, as a psychiatrist, you discovered the link between food and mental health, because I know that doctors are trained to direct patients to nutritionists when the topic of food is raised.
that's right. And before I answer you, Violet, I just want to say it was such a pleasure having you in the course, your contributions, your insights from your own work, your own clinical experience, your own knowledge, and your own life experience. That's one of the things I love about teaching the courses is meeting clinicians like you. And thanks for inviting me onto the podcast. So how did I become interested in this? I mean, I honestly, it never crossed my mind that the brain cared about what we eat. And I really just thought of food as a way to control my weight. I thought of, food in terms of, being able to provide the essential nutrients, but I really didn't think about it much more than that. The profound impact that our food choices have on our brain chemistry and on our hormonal balance inside of our bodies. And really it was probably about 10 years into my practice. I was prescribing medications and doing psychotherapy and enjoying all of that, but really most of my patients weren't getting that much better. Quite honestly, just as you were saying, a lot of people do take psychiatric medications, and psychiatric medications can be helpful in some cases, and I still use them in my work. There's a place for them. But if we're being honest, they fail most people. They don't bring most people enough relief. And the relief that some people do get from medicines comes at usually a pretty big cost in terms of side effects and health problems down the road. So it wasn't until my own health problems started, cropping up in my early 40s that I became interested in nutrition, because conventional medical care just wasn't able to help me figure out what was wrong. They all the tests were normal, and I was kind of left to my own devices to figure out what was going on. And it was through that kind of selfish pursuit of, trying to solve my own problems that I started instinctively experimenting with my diet, and ultimately ended up with a diet that was upside down and backwards from what we're told is good for us. And that was the diet that resolved all of my own physical health issues and improved my mental health as well in really noticeable ways that I hadn't even been aiming to do. And so it really was accidental that I stumbled into diet as a treatment, and nutrition science as a new area of study. I mean, I never studied nutrition before, and when I started studying nutrition, I kind of fell in love with nutrition science, and because food is fascinating, and changing the diet can be such a powerful intervention for mental health conditions. It can help people in ways no medicine can within just a matter of weeks in many cases. But you have to know which changes are the right ones to make, and they're not the ones we're used to hearing about.
I love what you just said about it helping you first and then we bringing it back to other people. One thing that I will say is that most people come to their doctor, their dentist, their psychologist, believing, psychiatrist, whatever it is, believing that they have everything together. Their health must be perfect. Their everything must be perfect. And I feel like it's so rare to hear a doctor acknowledge that they take medication or a psychologist, psychiatrist acknowledge, because just like on social media, you present well when you're in front of a client.
A lot of people make a lot of assumptions about the health and well-being and the life and their lifestyle of the people they go to for help. I mean, sometimes it's easy to see that a person might be unhealthy. Sometimes people be a physician or a therapist can be visibly unhealthy from the outside, but we want to place our trust and our faith in the people that we go to for help, and we often will tell ourselves a lot of stories about what their lives look like and how they kind of have it all together, especially maybe in their personal life. And or we don't know how many medications they take. We don't know whether they're suffering from depression. We don't know, if they've just gone through a divorce. We don't know what their childhood was like. We don't, and that's a good thing. We shouldn't necessarily know everything about our therapists. It's good to have boundaries, but we're people too. I mean, all of us are humans and we're vulnerable to all the same things that all the other humans are too. Yeah, and to a certain extent, I think sharing a certain amount of that personal story can be really helpful for people that come to us for help, because they do kind of take a little bit of the mystique out of it and kind of level the playing field and realize that we're both two human beings in the room and we both have struggles and we both have challenges and we're both trying to figure this out together.
I don't know if you have a thought on why there's such a disconnect between food, physical health, and mental health. So I feel like even on physical health level, we discount some of the internal problems that we live with, whether it's heart, diabetes. We discount the impact, but mental health especially, I feel like that's even further removed. That we don't acknowledge that the food we put in our mouth could possibly impact our brain.
Exactly. And it is the brain is kind of the worst case scenario. That's the place that we think is the least affected. But I used to think this way too. Well, what could food possibly have to do with the brain, right? But even with the body, even now in 2024, lots of people will look at me as if I have three heads when I say, "Oh, that rash you have, or that joint pain, or that, that stomach issue." I mean, sometimes with stomach, people will make a better connection, or whatever it is. I mean, I honestly have come to think of food as the first place to look, no matter what your physical or mental health issue is. It could be something super straightforward. It could be something strange and rare that everyone's mystified by. Um, I honestly think that a food first approach is going to bring people the most relief, the most efficiently. And but I do think that the reason why we don't think of it that way is we're not taught to think of it that way. I mean, most people think, oh, nutrition has something to do with your cholesterol level, or it might have to do with your risk for heart disease, or maybe diabetes, and of course your weight, right? But we don't think about our skin health, the health of our immune system, our brain, our pain management system, our stress hormone levels. We don't think about that all being connected, but it's all connected because everything, I don't need to tell you this, every cell in our body is made of the food we eat. And the brain is, after all, most scientists agree, part of the body. And so it didn't just materialize out of thin air. You built it with your food choices. And I think it's even more removed from the rest of the body. Historically, we've had a harder time kind of thinking of the head as part of the body because it's hard to see it. We can't see the brain. It's hidden inside the skull. We can't feel it working. There are no nerve endings. We can't touch it. It's this mysterious organ that has been so hard to understand and so hard to study that we kind of think of it as separate. But the good news is that all of the same things that we've learned about the ways in which our kind of standard way of eating is hazardous for the rest of the body, all the same principles apply to the brain. So you don't really need to learn anything new. It's all the same principles. You need you need to nourish your cells with all the essential nutrients. You need to protect your cells from damaging ingredients that are going to cause inflammation and oxidative stress and insulin resistance, and you need to energize your cells properly. Make sure that they've got a nice, smooth, reliable source of energy, so that all of your cells will serve you well into your old age. And we don't need a different diet for every organ in the body. All the organs follow the same rules.
Okay, so if we don't need a different diet for every cell in the body, but we tend to, in the psychiatric world, have targeted medications for certain parts of the brain, we think, then my confusion has always been most of these medications are either being made by some plant or some mineral that we have on the planet anyway that would have affected all of me. But now we're saying it's going to come in and it's going to just do it. And I feel like that's impossible. And I feel like what you started this off by saying that we take something, maybe we get the result, but we get all these other results,
Yeah.
is part of that.
Yes, I love the way you put that because, whenever we take a medicine, so a medicine is just a chemical that it either comes from a plant, often from a plant, or from an industrial plant. It's either from a factory or often from a plant food. Plants are really clever, and have evolved over hundreds of millions of years to create lots of really fascinating molecules to protect themselves, defend themselves, take care of themselves in the world. And so we can make use of those. We can exploit those for our own selfish purposes by extracting them, concentrating them, using them as medicines. But any medicine is designed to interfere with your normal biology. I'll never forget this. In medical school, there was our pharmacology teacher taught us that medicines are toxins with positive side effects. So they are designed to interfere with your normal biology. And that you may need that if you're in a dire circumstance. There's some emergency or some situation where nothing else has worked. You might need to kind of worm your way in there and try to figure, to kind of interrupt what's going on. But that's how medicines work. And you're right. When you take a medicine, you can't decide that it's only going to go to this one cell or this one neurotransmitter or this one organ. It's going to circulate throughout your body, and it's going to have effects on all of your cells. So, and for better and for worse. So one thing that's really fascinating to me, like when I started studying nutrition, I don't know, 15 years ago, whenever it was, I had a lot of aha moments along the way. And one of the aha moments I had was food is not medicine. Food is food and medicine is medicine. Food exists to do two things: give you parts and energy. Parts and fuel to run your cells and the right energy to build those cells and maintain those cells. And you give your cells what they need, and you step out of the way and you let evolutionary biology take it from there. Your body doesn't need any help from special superfoods or chemicals or supplements or extracts or nutraceuticals or nootropics. It doesn't need any of that. If you feed it properly, it knows how to take care of itself. So I think there is this, sometimes a lot of people get confused about the line between food and medicine. And we need to remind ourselves, okay, what is food for? And which foods are actually serving those purposes of nourishing, protecting, and energizing us? Which ones are the ones that are most worth your money, which are most worth eating, and then let everything else go.
So going back to what you said a few seconds ago, that we take medication and then we get sometimes outcomes that we're not happy with. I kind of, when I talk to people, I say, like, everything you put in your mouth, you're eating. So if I'm eating this medication and you're telling me that it's targeted and it's time restrained. So if I take a mental health medication for years with an S, I'm also changing my entire body, not just trying to achieve this one thing that I think I'm going to get from this, correct?
Exactly. So, medicines circulate throughout the body and they affect all of your cells. They may be better absorbed by certain cells, they may have stronger effects on certain cells than others, but that's not typically what's happening, because if it's getting into one cell, it's usually able to get into most of them. And so, whatever you're taking in as a medication to try to help yourself with a particular problem, it is going to have ripple effects. It is going to affect your other cells as well, and not necessarily in ways you were hoping for. So, and the brain is a especially good example of this because a lot of the psychiatric medications, often they're designed to try to raise or lower the activity or the level of a particular chemical in the brain, like a neurotransmitter, like dopamine or serotonin or GABA or glutamate or acetylcholine. And but you can't, it's just impossible. You cannot create a drug that goes only to the cells that are making that neurotransmitter, and only to those circuits, and not to the rest of the brain. And the other thing is, even if it could go only to those places and work only on those cells, um, the the body does something. It's kind of evolved to do this thing. All creatures, it's designed to compensate for whatever thing you're trying to do to it, to change it. So it's kind of like, it's called homeostasis, which means you trying to force something in one particular direction, but the body will automatically react by trying to get things back to the way they were before. So to try to restore that original equilibrium. So if you're trying to raise serotonin over here, you might end up lowering dopamine over there. If you're trying to raise GABA, you know what I mean? So it's like whack-a-mole. You've squashed down one problem that you thought you had, and another one's going to crop up over here, because there are all these ripple effects, and you can't control them. It's an illusion. you and so I love the way you're thinking about that, because it's not that simple. It's a wonderful story that we tell ourselves. Oh, I take this medicine and it raises my serotonin levels, and I need that because I have a serotonin deficit. Well, there are serotonin receptors and cells throughout the gut, for example. You might end up with constipation. You might end up with stomach pain. You might end up with digestive problems. You might end up with some irritation of the gut lining. All kinds of things can happen because you're affecting not just the brain but also the gut, and we don't have the control that we think we have.
So, since most medications come from veg and well, some mineral, but mostly vegetation, you said in the book, and you said in the book, I encourage everyone to completely avoid all grains and legumes because the health risks outweigh the health benefits. Since I'm trying to make this link right now because people are constantly saying to me, but yeah, we can have these kind of nuts and we can have these kind of ancient grains and we can have they're healthy and the digestion is slow and all kind of reasons that people give why these things are okay to have, beans and all kinds of stuff. Can you please help people so wellness warriors need to understand why this is not reality?
Well, this was one of the many, really surprises for me when I started studying nutrition, because I'd heard all those same things too. I'd heard that the healthiest diets are based on grains and beans and nuts and seeds. I'd heard that we needed lots of fiber for our digestive system to work. I had heard that plant proteins were healthier than animal proteins, and on and on and on. So when I started studying nutrition, I think as most people do when they start studying nutrition, it didn't take long before I was like, huh, there's actually no evidence for any of those beliefs. And worse, these foods are far more risk than benefit. There is no it doesn't make any biological sense to base our diet on grains and legumes. They are, if you're looking at the whole foods, if you're going to consider grains and beans foods, they're really they're not fit for human consumption. We have to do all kinds of things to them to make them less dangerous and more digestible and more nutritious to us. We have to soak them and ferment them and sprout them and boil them and do all kinds of things to them, because otherwise they are toxic full stop. So I was taught all those things. But if you look at the actual biology of those foods, there are so many reasons not to eat them, and just a few reasons to eat them if you have no other choice. So if you have no other choice, if you, for example, if you choose to eat a vegan diet, if you don't feel comfortable eating animal foods, you must consume legumes or you will become protein amino acid deficient. If you don't have enough money for animal foods or don't have access to animal foods, you must include legumes and nuts and seeds in your diet, or you will be suffering amino acid deficiencies. So if you have no other choice, or if you're choosing to go that way, you will need to rely on those foods. But otherwise, there is no biological reason to eat these foods. They're the least nutritious. They're extremely low in nutrients. Grains are so low in nutrients that all of the products that we buy in the store that are made from grains are fortified with nutrients, because if you don't fortify them, there's almost nothing in them that's going to help you, and there's nothing there for you. and and even worse, the nutrients that grains and legumes appear to contain, and this is one of those things a lot of people don't know, but I'm sure a lot of your viewers know. Just because a plant food contains a nutrient does not necessarily mean you can access it, because plants have very cleverly evolved these really fascinating molecules to guard their nutrients for their own selfish purposes. We all have to protect ourselves in the world, and plants are no exception. And the grains and legumes, as well as the nuts and the seeds, the grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, they're all essentially seeds. If you cut them open, you will see a little plant embryo inside, and that embryo needs to be defended sometimes for many years. It needs to sit on its own in the middle of a field somewhere, or under a tree, or wherever it's going to sit, and wait and wait and wait and wait for conditions to be right to sprout. And during all that time, it's got to hold on to all the nutrients that it's going to need to grow. So the grains, beans, nuts, and seeds are the most heavily defended, not just from a nutrient standpoint, but they're also defended with toxins to ward off predators, like little creatures that will come along and try to eat them. So these are the highest risk, least nutritious whole foods, uh, uh, in my opinion, looking at the biology of it, that we could. Why would you want to base a diet on the least nutritious, riskiest food on the planet?
And I want to add to what you just said this word that is always thrown around that drives me crazy: tolerate. We are constantly being asked to find a way to tolerate. So we do a healthy, whether it's keto, paleo, carnivore diet, get a bunch of stuff out of our life that was harming us, and then we're encouraged to reintroduce and see what you can tolerate. Georgia, can you please talk to the idea of tolerating foods versus eating what's healthiest?
I love this distinction, because there's what's ideal or best for us, or what helps us feel our best, and then there's what we can sustainably eat over time, like what people can manage to do comfortably for long periods of time, right? And there's a big difference there. So if people want to know, okay, what are the foods that are most nutritious and safest and least risky for me to eat, that are going to accomplish these three goals: nourish, protect, energize. They're going to accomplish these three goals. What are the foods on the planet that are best at all three of those things? It is the animal foods. Biologically, hands down, there's just no argument. They are the only foods that contain every nutrient we need in its proper, most highly bioavailable form. And with rare exceptions, if we're talking about meat, seafood, poultry, we're safe. Eggs and dairy, a little different, but without any anti-nutrients or defensive toxins to interfere with our full utilization of those nutrients. So only animal foods. There's not a single plant food that meets all three of those criteria. So if you can only afford one food group, this is the one to buy. And if you've got a lot of different kinds of health problems, mysterious issues, brain, body, doesn't matter. They're all the same. So one organism. You are one organism. um, I argue this in the book that, if maybe you've tried a whole foods, maybe you've tried a Mediterranean diet, maybe you've tried a paleo diet, maybe you've tried a ketogenic diet, you're still not doing well. Well, it makes sense from a biological standpoint to, at least temporarily as an experiment, to go plant free and see how you feel. Now, if you feel your best, which many people do, there are I've had some exceptions in my clinical practice where some people have not benefited from that, sometimes even felt worse. But by and large, most people tell me they feel their best on a so-called carnivore or plant-free diet. Then you have real information for yourself that works for you. You can then decide what you want to do long term. And so I tell people in the book, you could conceivably continue to eat this way for the rest of your life, or you could try, if you're really, it's driving you nuts not to be able to eat other things, you can try expanding your diet and find your personal safest outer limit where you're still getting enough benefits to make it worth it. Even if you don't feel as well, just to understand, if you understand, the pros and cons of these different food groups, then you can make informed choices about where you draw that line. And even if yes, let's say I've got a patient who's 100% feeling excellent in every way on a carnivore diet, but they're miserable or socially challenged by it or feeling deprived or whatever it is, they're uncomfortable with it and they're not going to be able to stay on it. There are ways that you can expand your diet that make biological sense. I would still say there are certain places you don't want to go, no matter who you are. But most people don't have the information that they need to know what makes sense in terms of safest versus riskiest.
What I love about the distinction you just made is it's the difference between you can't possibly eat this way all the time, which is what we're told, and the reality that I might have people around me that I want to interact with who don't understand the way that I'm eating, and so that might make some kind of sense to sometimes have these other foods in my life. Or if I myself, I'm feeling I don't have the willpower, whatever you want to call it. But I want to make sure that I clarify this, and I want to make sure I got what you said right. Actually, ultimately, meat, fish, poultry, that's the thing that we need to eat. That's the thing that is called food. Everything else, all those plants, are for fun, which is what I tell my community. Plants are for fun. They're not food. They're the entertainment that you put on your plate. I feel like you're agreeing with me.
That's really funny. Yeah, I mean, I think if we're being really, what's the word, strict in our definitions, yes, meaning that as long as if you base your diet on animal foods, I haven't found any evidence that you need to eat anything else. So, in that sense, plants are optional, and all plants contain potentially risky molecules. So and I think that's important for people to know. There are lots of people out there who, and here's the word that you love so much, tolerate. There are lots of people out there who, they seem to feel fine, if they include certain plant foods in their diet, and there's no noticeable negative effect, at least that we can detect. But that doesn't mean that's ideal. There may be ultimately a certain price you pay that's kind of hard to figure out until we studying nutrition, studying any dietary pattern long term in different kinds of people is virtually impossible. you can't take 1,000 people and control everything they eat for 10 years and see what happens. It's impossible. So we don't have long-term experimental clinical data on any diet. And I think that's a lot of people think, oh, but this carnivore diet or even ketogenic diet, we don't have any long-term studies on that. We don't have long-term studies on any dietary pattern. So what we do have is we have just mountains of solid biological information, science about what each of these foods contains, what our cells need, how our metabolism works, all of these different things. And if you use logic and biology and evolutionary logic to design your dietary pattern, that's going to put you, in my opinion, on the safest ground for the long haul, rather than these dietary patterns that are made up out of thin air. Mediterranean diet, low fat diet, rainbow of fruits and vegetables diet, vegan diet. There are lots of other dietary patterns that we've heard are healthier for us, and none of those are grounded in biology. Even if clinical trials may show, and they do, that lots of these other dietary patterns, if you compare them to the so-called standard American diet or SAD diet, they all outperform the standard American diet in clinical trials. But what diet wouldn't? I mean, the standard American diet is so hazardous, so low quality, so unhealthy. Any change you make to that diet is going to be a step in the right direction. So there have been about a dozen different dietary patterns that have outperformed the standard American diet. Uh, whole food, whole food plant-based diets, which include vegan and vegetarian diets, Mediterranean diets, ketogenic diets, low-fat diets, low-salt diets. I mean, just about any diet. There's something called a Nordic diet. Lots of diets have been tested against the standard American diet and have outperformed the standard American diet. That doesn't mean that those diets are ideal for us. It just means they're better than the standard American diet. So, and when you look at the clinical trials, when you look at the way the science is conducted about all of those different diets, which look so different on the surface, like how can a whole foods plant-based diet and say a low carbohydrate diet that includes meat, how can those two diets both be healthier for us? How can those both be considered healthy? Well, first of all, it's because they're compared to this terrible standard. So it's kind of an easy thing to win that game. But the other thing is that all of those diets actually do have something really important in common. You just can't tell, and it's just not something that shows up in the headline. Every single one of those diets in clinical trials is either dramatically lower or completely devoid of refined carbohydrates. So that's a really healthy change to make to any diet. And that may be the only reason that all these diets do better. We don't know because we don't test these things. So whatever dietary pattern people are attached to as healthy because they've seen studies, oh, this is a healthy diet, this is a healthy diet. Well, compared to what? And are you feeling your personal, emotional, and physical best on that diet or not? And just kind of trying to be as honest as you can with yourself about the answers to those questions.
I think part of the problem is, for most of us, what is my personal best? So, as you mentioned at the beginning, when you changed your diet, your mental health, you weren't expecting that. I know I wasn't expecting that when I changed my diet. But yeah, I was like, whoa, I can think faster. Like, it just, things were clearer. And I think part of the problem is that most people don't realize that while they're tolerating all this garbage in their diet, they're actually harming their mental health, physical health, slowly, slowly. I will agree with you that when you take most of the stuff out and then put back a little bit, sure, you've slowed down that train to poor health dramatically, but you're still on it. And I think that's hopefully what people are going to understand from the things that you're saying right now. We're still on it.
Most people I would, if I had to guess, 99% of people on the planet or so, the vast majority of people, are eating a diet that's harming them and they don't realize it because what they're because they've been told that what they're eating is good for them. I mean, even people who are really working hard and trying their best to follow the quote science about nutrition and eat a quote healthy diet, even people who are very, very health conscious, um, because they have the wrong information, even their best efforts. It's not just that the dietary pattern that they've been told is healthy, say it's the Mediterranean or whole food plants based or whatever it is. They've been told that diet is healthy, but it's not just that that diet doesn't work or that it's kind of, it's not going to help. It's that it's harmful. It's actually destroying your health. And there's lots and lots of good evidence for that. So I think this is why it's so important. So podcasts like yours, getting the message out to people, books, videos, conferences, the internet. I mean, it used to take a long time for new useful information to get out there to everyday people. And now, thanks to social media and kind of people challenging the status quo and learning things, digging into the science and researching online in ways that never used to be possible, we have access to all kinds of wonderful information. We can now see. We can jump decades ahead of our physicians and empower ourselves with biologically based information that works. I mean, this information, when you make the right changes to your diet, you can see improvements, dramatic improvements in your physical and mental health and in your lab tests and everything else within a number of weeks. And I mean, some people feel better in 3 days. Because when you make the right changes, your body and mind respond by working better. And it's not going to be, just about like nibbling around the edges of your diet, which is what I think the Mediterranean diet does, right? It just kind of takes some of the bad stuff out, but leaves far too much of the bad stuff in. Or it's not just about sprinkling superfoods on top of whatever you're eating now and hoping that that's going to save you. If you want real fundamental change, noticeable, meaningful change to your physical and mental health, you have to make meaningful changes to your diet. You have to fundamentally restructure your diet from the ground up in ways that make biological sense, that aren't just about guesswork and untested theories and wishful thinking. So that is where I see the most dramatic recoveries and improvements in mental health in my practice, is when people are willing to make that commitment to, okay, let's start from scratch. Let's rebuild from the ground up, and enough of this, kind of nibbling around the edges and sprinkling things on top doesn't work.
If we're looking at building from the ground up, I want to clarify. You said earlier that milk and eggs could be an issue. And then I have a follow up question, but let's start there. Milk and eggs could be an issue.
I know. So if we're going to take this biological approach, we have to be even handed about it and put the animal foods under the same scrutiny that we put the plant foods, right? And so meat, seafood, poultry are in a separate chapter because they are very different. But eggs and dairy are nature's growth formulas. So an egg contains everything you need to grow a tiny chick or bird embryo into a fuzzy little thing that's ready to hatch within a number of weeks. And then dairy or milk is it's a species specific. So it's not, we don't have the same milk as a cow or a camel or a goat. Um, it's species specific growth formula designed for rapid growth of a tiny baby cow, let's say, into a much bigger cow that's ready to graduate to solid food. These are specially designed for rapid growth and their and protection of the needs of that brand new creature. And then all creatures are supposed to graduate to solid food. So eggs contain almost every nutrient we need. The biggest exceptions are iron and vitamin C. So for vegetarians, eggs are a fantastic staple food, a fantastic protein source. It's complete amino acid profile, every nutrient we need with two exceptions. And the iron is a very important exception to point out because eggs contain an anti-nutrient called phosphatidyl, which interferes with our ability to absorb most of the iron in the egg. So you need to make sure you're getting other sources of iron if you're a vegetarian, and eggs are your protein source. Milk, and there are a few anti-nutrients. There are a few defensive molecules in the eggs too, but you cook them and you for the most part you're fine. So eggs are a fantastic choice for most people, unless you've got allergies or sensitivities. They're and unfortunately I don't do well with eggs, so I wish I did. But they're a great choice for a lot of people, but they're not the same as meat, seafood, and poultry. The other thing about eggs, they're naturally extremely low in carbohydrate and have a naturally ketogenic ratio, protein to fat ratio. Dairy, very complicated. Dairy has a lot of the proteins and fats and carbohydrates in milk are not found in any other animal food. They're unique to milk. The casein, for example, one of the proteins in dairy, lactose, you don't find lactose in any other animal food. And the fats, the types of fats that are in dairy, dairy foods are the only animal foods that are very high in saturated fat. All other animal foods are low, relatively low in saturated fat. And that's why when they do clinical studies with looking at saturated fat, when there's saturated animal fat, it's almost always dairy fat that they're using. Because most animal fats are more unsaturated than saturated, little known secret. So in any case, not that saturated fat is bad for you, because it's not. But dairy is very special. So dairy contains the proteins in dairy, for example. They are designed to turn on the growth hormone systems in the baby cow so that the cow can grow. In order to grow, we need hormones. We need growth hormones. So, and the same thing can happen to us. So when we take in dairy, it can affect our hormonal balance. It can raise our insulin levels, for example. In much whey protein, for example, can raise our insulin levels almost as much as pure sugar does. You're not going to get a glucose spike, but you will get a hefty insulin spike. And so, because insulin is growth hormone, and dairy is trying to help you grow. So, lots of other complicated things we could talk about, but I've already talked too long, I'm sure. So I'll stop and pause and say, okay, was that what you were asking about, or were you asking about something else that I didn't get to?
I love that answer. I love it because it also points back to plants and animals are going to protect their baby no matter what. And that egg has stuff in it. And if you react, it's because, yes, so now the question is, you know, how much egg should be in a person's diet? So there's so many questions that come up, right? The more you learn, the more you start to like see where maybe there's more issues. And for the most of us who've maybe never taken eggs out of our diet because that was never something that was pointed at, how do we know that that's not what's causing our stalls or etc., our mental health issues or whatever? Like, I think that one of the most fascinating things about reading your book was just all the new places that you had me looking for what's going on in my body, what's going on in my mind. It's just kind of like a complete wow factor. And it leads me to my next question, actually. So, in the world of veg, I guess the way I'll ask you this is, what would be your top offenders? I'm pulling those out immediately. So, all my wellness warriors who are watching this, what should they pull out immediately? Don't pass go. Like this, it's gone.
Thank you for reading the book, and thank you for finding new things in it to learn, because you're already incredibly knowledgeable, Violet. So it's just music to my ears that even somebody who's highly educated about this topic could find new interesting things. I thank you. I'm so glad that was worth your time. Um, so which plant foods are the most worth worrying about? I mean, it's a bit of a fool's errand, but I did, because every plant has I mean, really, it could be any plant that's bothering you. So I want to make that clear to people that, but I did want to try to help people identify which ones were the most common culprits, or if you look at their biology and you look at the chemicals that are in those plants, which ones, if you could only pick a few to remove, would be most worth avoiding. And I think that's what you're asking. So, yeah. So the grains and the legumes we've already talked about, but really all the seeds. So nuts and seeds are also seeds. Grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. Those are the foods that are riskiest to our health for all the reasons we already talked about. But there are also and the flaxseed. We can throw flax seeds in there because flax seeds, even though we're told that they're really healthy for us because they have omega-3 fatty acids in them, A, it's the wrong kind of omega-3, and B, flax seeds do contain trace amounts of cyanide, which is a mitochondrial poison. And so, why would you want to risk even trace amounts of a mitochondrial poison um, uh, to just to try to get the wrong kind of omega-3 in your diet? So, no reason to eat flax seeds, and I would say anybody with mental health issues should avoid them for optimal brain. We're looking for optimal brain health here. I also recommend removing the nightshades. So the nightshades for a couple of reasons. So one is that they contain neurotoxins called glycoalkaloids. The nightshades are essentially tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, goji berries, um, and 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 white potatoes. So, and even though those foods look nothing alike in a lot of ways, if you're looking at the fruit of the plant, they all have that little. I think this is helpful for people to know. They have this little telltale green elfish hat on the top. So when you look at a tomato, it's got that little curly green bit on the top. So and potato fruits do as well. We just don't eat the potato fruits. So anyway, all those foods that look like that are nightshades, and nightshades for two reasons. One, they contain glycoalkaloids, and the other is that they contain lectins. And lectins are also the seed foods, the grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, also very high in lectins. These are powerful defensive molecules that can breach our cellular barriers and aggravate our immune system. So, and lots of other possible outcomes as well. But it makes sense, biological sense, to eat a low lectin diet. And if you're trying to do that, it would be avoiding the grains, beans, nuts, and seeds and the nightshades. And then there are lots of other things I could mention too. You don't want to eat high amounts, especially of raw cruciferous vegetables. You don't want to eat a lot of star fruit. Star fruit's really high in oxalates. Most of the oxalate in our body is generated from our own chemical pathways. But star fruit is an example of a food that is astronomically high in oxalates. And then there are lots of foods which are very high in toxins and anti-nutrients but we only tend to eat them in tiny amounts. And these are the spices, so herbs and spices. Herbs and spices have strong flavor, so we usually tend to only eat tiny amounts of them. But that strong, anything pungent or bitter or sharp, that's nature's evolutionary clue to toxicity. So anything that's bitter or sharp or pungent, as exciting as it may taste on the taste buds, that's a clue that it's trying to hurt you. And so people who again are looking for optimal health want to be careful with those. And the nightshades and a lot of the spices, the red spices are actually nightshades, the peppers, things like paprika and chili powder. And you know what's fascinating? I don't know if you've noticed this, Violet. I don't know what's happened to us, but when you go to like any kind of like a hot food bar, like even at like Whole Foods or somewhere, you look across what's in the prepared hot heated trays. 75% of it is bright red. It's loaded with peppery spices. I don't know why we think that, it's as if we can't taste or appreciate, the simple whole foods anymore. We've got to douse it in sugar and spice and all kinds of other things. So I guess those are the things that I would say for people to be the most cautious about. Cassava root is another one because it also contains cyanide.
Can you just help people? Because cruciferous vegetables are on keto, like very pushed. Can you help people understand what's the problem with cruciferous? I was like,
The thing that I'm most concerned about with cruciferous vegetables is that they have anti-thyroid properties. And so, especially if they're raw or if you're eating large quantities of them, that can raise to the level of actually causing, sort of promoting lower thyroid hormone activity. And the thyroid, of course, thyroid hormone is is crucial to cellular metabolism. Every cell in the brain and body is, paying attention to thyroid hormone, and which helps the cell determine essentially how fast it should operate and what it should be doing, how it should be spending its time. And we know hypothyroidism is rampant. I mean, so many people, especially women, but plenty of men too, are on thyroid hormone replacement. But there are foods that naturally interfere with the ability for us to build thyroid hormone molecules. And the cruciferous vegetables and soy is another one. Soy is millet, which is becoming more popular as a gluten-free grain. Millet, soy, rutabaga, lots of raw cruciferous vegetables, and even larger amounts of cooked cruciferous vegetables. These do have anti-thyroid activity, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. So these are called goitrogens. They make it harder for us to absorb and utilize iodine, the essential mineral iodine, to build thyroid hormone molecules.
okay. What I'm understanding from what you just helped us to see with food, so veg, I don't want to call that food anymore, is that the people that go to their doctor. So I'm going to think ladies often. We go to our doctors. We have weight problems happening. We're not feeling great. We're exhausted. And the typical diet that they tell us to do, low fat, like get those grains, basically make our story worse. And it's emotional too, because a lot of when we're tired, we're snappy with our kids and we're having arguments with our spouse, going back to the number one things that people talk to me about. So like right now I'm sitting in front of my viewers and you've just given us this list. But the flip side of the coin is I'm going to go out into the world with other people. And how do I manage this? Do you have a helpful way for people to frame this, especially to their doctors? Oh my goodness. But do you have a helpful way for people to frame this of like, why am I doing all of this stuff to themselves, to the people that they're going to be eating with, and to their doctors? What would they say?
One thing that people need to know, I know that we were talking earlier about that we imagine lots of things about our doctors. And one thing we imagine is that they know things about nutrition, and they don't. So unless a doctor has taken it upon themselves to dive into the quagmire that is nutrition research, which I happen to love doing, but I'm kind of unusual that way. Most people don't have the time or the interest to do that. Um, but I have I don't know if it's some kind of personality disorder or something, but I I love to do it. Um, but most doctors aren't interested, right? Or have the time or whatever. They'd much rather be doing something else. So I think it's really important for patients to know that their doctors do not have nutrition education. In 4 years of medical school, we had maybe 2 or 3 hours of nutrition education in 4 years. And most of what we were taught was incorrect because it was based on this method called nutrition epidemiology, which is wild guesses and questionnaires and untested theories and ideology. Trust me, there's a whole chapter about it if you're curious. It is not science. Most doctors, and then 4 years of psychiatry residency, we didn't talk about food once. So for the ordinary person out there, regardless of what you do for a living or how much school you have or haven't had, you could learn in 2 hours more nutrition science than your doctor knows. And that's not their fault. It's just the way the system is set up. So when you go in and have questions, make sure that you're bringing in information and that you're also asking questions and not just taking what they're saying at face value, because the information they have is simply incorrect. And a big reason why I wrote the book, now I wrote the book hopefully in a way that will be accessible to lots of ordinary people, but I also did throw a lot of science in there for practitioners, for physicians, for dietitians, for counselors, and for people who are used to a certain type of nutrition information. This is also a resource for practitioners. So if you go into your doctor or your nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, and say, well, you're asking, this just happened to my mother last week. You go in, your LDL cholesterol is a little high and you're trying to lose some weight. And your doctor says, here's a prescription for a cholesterol medication. Get that cholesterol down. The doctor has no idea what cholesterol even is. The doctor has no idea that your body knows exactly how much cholesterol it needs, and it will only absorb what it needs and no more. Your doctor doesn't know that years ago, even the most conservative scientific organizations came out telling us that dietary cholesterol is no longer a nutrient of concern. There's no relationship, essentially, between the amount of cholesterol in your diet and the amount of cholesterol in your bloodstream. Oh, and by the way, high cholesterol is not the cause of heart disease anyway. So if you don't have that information, you will be at the mercy of whatever that doctor has been told to tell you by the pharmaceutical companies, by the nutrition epidemiologists who are basing their recommendations on wild guesses and wishful thinking and untested theories, and your health will suffer as a result. It's really, unfortunately, for better or for worse, I think it's mostly a good thing. Your health is in your hands. You are responsible for your own health, and you get to decide what advice you follow. And it's really important to know that they don't know for the most part. There are exceptions, but most doctors do not have the information that they need to guide you about nutrition.
I agree with that. I think that I've seen so many times where doctors are overweight and they don't know how to get their life under control. So clearly there's missing information. What's frustrating is that, for example, you belong to the order of psychiatrists, and like there's the order of doctors, and there's the order of neuropsychologists. Like there's all these different divisions in medicine. And because of all the divisions, like everybody sticks to what they're supposed to talk about rather than talking about the person who's in front, like talking to me about what you see happening. And sure, refer me to somebody else, but you could, on my way out the door, tell me, by the way, this, and this. And I feel like maybe that's part of why we get pulled into these stalls with our health, because as a normal person, am I confident to say I'm not taking, well, maybe the statin by now we're confident to say, but what about the high blood pressure medication, right? What if I'm starting, or I've started Carnivore, and now I'm taking blood pressure medication and my doctor doesn't seem to care?
You've touched on something that is a major problem in our healthcare system, which is that all of the lab tests, all of the recommendations, all the medication studies are done in people who are eating the wrong way. So when you're eating the wrong way, all your pathways are operating differently. And so you might think it's normal to have a cholesterol level of X, or a triglyceride level of Y, or a blood pressure of Z, a thyroid hormone level of whatever it is. You might be told that it's normal to have your triglycerides be 150. You might be, I'm sorry, I don't know the Canadian units. You might be told that it's normal to have to wake up with a fasting blood sugar of 110. Like, you might be told that these things are normal, but that's based on the average person in the world who is not optimally healthy. And the medication studies are done in those very same people too. Let's say, Violet, you walk into your doctor because you, as I understand it, eat a carnivore diet, and you're taking a medication. Your doctor is only going to understand that medicine in the context of a completely different ecosystem inside your body. Your doctor's not necessarily going to understand, well, what's going to happen to Violet when she switches her diet to this carnivore diet? What do I need to know about that medication? What do I need to know about how switching her diet is going to affect her blood pressure? Because doctors aren't trained in nutrition therapy, and they don't know that changing your diet in particular ways especially diets that like ketogenic and carnivore adjacent or carnivorous or whatever, lower plant, lower carbohydrate, lower insulin diets. These diets fundamentally change your cells' operating systems. And that's what you want. I mean, these are good changes. You want your blood pressure to drop. You want your blood sugar to drop. You want to let go of that excess fluid you've been carrying around that's been making you feel so sluggish and bloated, that your high insulin, higher toxin diet have been promoting. You want those changes, but you want a powerful intervention. These diets are powerful biochemical interventions. But they're so powerful that if you're also taking a medication at the same time that it's trying to do those same things, or if you've got a health issue that's going to make your system more fragile to a sudden change, this could be potentially dangerous for you if you're not working with somebody who understands that chemistry. And so, if you're for a really nice concrete example is, let's say you're taking a blood pressure medication, and your and it's keeping your blood pressure in a healthy range. So maybe your blood pressure when you start your diet is 110/70. That's because your blood pressure medication is keeping it there, right? Before you started your blood pressure medicine, maybe it was like 140/90 or something, right? You start this diet, your insulin levels drop, your cellular chemistry changes, your fluid balance changes, your electrolyte balance changes, the hormones that regulate blood pressure change, your stress hormone levels change. Everything starts shifting in good ways. And now your blood pressure medicine is, the diet's lowering your blood pressure. So now you've got two things lowering your blood pressure, and that is potentially dangerous. The diet on its own is healthy. It's in combination with the medication that now you've got too much downward pressure on your blood pressure, and you could pass out. Your blood pressure could drop, to 90/60 or 80/50, because the combination of the diet and the medication is too strong. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I teach this course, and that's one of the reasons why it's really important. In the book, I explain to people that, the diet is healthy, but you do have to be careful when you're switching over, because it is a powerful intervention. It's not like other diets.
I'm going to add a wrinkle.
Please.
I'm going to add a wrinkle. What about when that whole idea of first hormesis, but second homeostasis? So the wrinkle that I'm adding here is you do the dot, you do key, let's say carnivore, your blood pressure is coming down, but you're on medication. Isn't it reality that at some point you're going to get to a point where the medication and the diet because your body is adjusting at the same time? And so there's a question in my mind.
Yep.
At some point, I'll get to a place where my blood pressure just looks good. And the doctors are going to say, see, you see the medication's working. But do I really still need that medication? And if I stay on that medication, what happens? Because the doctors, once you get there, they're going to be like, why would we change anything? But why would I keep taking, again, hormetic effect, right? I'm still putting this toxin in my body. At some point, will it not become a problem again? So my body will start going up again. Question.
I agree that so the goal in nutritional and metabolic psychiatry, the way that I practice and a growing number of colleagues are practicing, the goal is the least amount of medication possible. And that means not just getting people to feel well on the combination of the diet. Let's say they come in taking the medicine and you switch the diet. Now they're on diet plus a medication, and maybe you've lowered the dose a little bit or whatever. And you've gotten this, like you said, this place where things are looking good. It still makes sense to keep going, trying to lower that medication even further, and maybe even trying to remove it entirely, because just because it looks good with the two there, don't you want to know, if you took the medicine away, if you could fly on your own steam, whatever, that's mixing a metaphor. I can't remember what the thing is. So, don't you want to know if you can go it alone? And oftentimes you can. And so I think everybody deserves that that careful taper with the goal being the goal is the least amount of medication necessary. So what I like to say is, when you're tapering medicine, start low, small increments, go slow, but try to go all the way. Try. It doesn't mean you're going to get there, but you owe it to yourself to find out what's possible. So don't just settle for, okay, this is good enough. What's you're trying to get to optimal mental health, right? So keep going slowly, carefully, but keep going and see what's possible.
I love that because I feel like doctors have us scared sometimes. I'm not talking about you, obviously not you, but but we go to our doctor and by the time they put us on the medication, they've slapped our hands how many times of change your diet, lose weight, da, da, da. Oh, you failed. Here's the medication. And then, I mean, maybe we needed to fail to get to the point where we could do the thing.
Yeah.
And then when we're actually doing the thing, they ignore what we're doing. Our weight could be coming down. And so I think what you just said, and this is both sides. This is mental health and physical health. I know we're talking about physical because I think everybody can see it with its physical. Like there's a number that you're looking at for your blood pressure. You see the number. But mental health is the same. Like I know how I feel when I'm feeling good, and I know how I feel when I'm not feeling good. And when you start seeing that light again, and the doctor is saying, no, but you need the medication to stay the same, are we risking that the body adjusts? Because that's what it does. The body will always adjust. And we need to understand that.
I guess it's such an important point you're making, and it's one that I don't think anybody's ever really asked me about. So it's great, and I've never thought about it quite that way, and it's absolutely correct. Um, all medicines have side effects, and so all medicines have risks. And so again, you want to always do that risk benefit analysis. Well, do I really need this? Why? What price am I paying for the results I'm getting? And so I do think that we want to, again, everybody has their own goals, but the least amount of medication possible, and ideally none if you can get there. And it does take patience and skill and time to do it because it could take a year. I mean, it could take a year to come off certain medicines, especially in psychiatric medications. But you know, if you're trying to get to optimal health, you really want to minimize the toxins in your diet, and you want to minimize the toxins in your medicine cabinet too. And so that's when, and you were saying also, Violet, something else that I thought was important is that you know the difference between feeling well and not feeling quite right. But most of us, and this was true for me too before I changed my diet, I didn't know how much better I could feel. I thought I would, from a mental health perspective, I thought I was doing okay. And I think most of us have come to expect a pretty low bar when it comes to our mental health and physical health. We expect to kind of run out of energy in the middle of the day. We expect to, get easily irritable, anxious, not recover, not be resilient, just kind of have a short fuse, get really stressed with not that much stress, not recover from traumas or losses. And because we've been fed the wrong information about nutrition for generations, we've been feeding our brains improperly for our whole lives. And none of us really knows how much better we could feel if we were feeding our brains properly until you try it. And then when you try it, like, whoa, I had no idea that I could feel this good. That was exactly what happened to me in 2000. Oh my gosh, when was it? 7 or 8, whenever I changed my diet. It was exactly what happened to me. I mean, I just come to expect a certain normal, but that's not normal. It's not ideal. It's not optimal. It's not good. You kind of getting by, but so much more is possible. And if you change your diet in the right ways, you can see what's possible for you.
We're expected to eat garbage. It is on the menu everywhere we go. And because we're expected to eat garbage, we think it's normal. And because we think it's normal, we end up in situations where we don't realize that we are drawn to the garbage more than we control. Daniel wanted to ask you, beside bringing carbohydrates down, is there anything else that we should be bringing up in our diet to help with anxiety, depression, like all the mental health? Is there something that we should be having more of?
I love this question because there's two answers to it. And one answer is we all have the same basic biological requirements. There's bioindividuality in terms of, our thresholds for certain things, but we all have the same basic nutritional needs. So if you're not eating enough animal foods, if you're not eating enough high quality protein, fat, and all the other, it's not just protein and fat that is in meat, seafood, and poultry. It's all those amazing micronutrients and vitamins, minerals that are in there, and other molecules that are essential for our cells working properly. So if you're not getting enough animal food, that's important to add more of that in. But if you're already doing that, one thing I hear in that question, or maybe I'm hearing overtones of in that question, is, are there foods, special kind of superfoods, that we should be eating more of to boost our brain health, right? So to sort of like help our brain fight off inflammation and oxidative stress, and with foods that have special superpowers, like anti-inflammatory or antioxidant superpowers, or are especially rich in a particular vitamin or mineral or phytonutrient, polyphenols, and all kinds of other fun things that are in colorful fruits and vegetables. And lots of people, that's what a lot of us have been led to believe about brain health, like a brain healthy diet. When you ask the average person about a brain healthy diet, the immediate thing that comes to their mind is superfoods, lots of colorful plant foods, blueberries, and and chia seeds, and walnuts, and cruciferous vegetables, and all kinds of flax seeds, all kinds of special foods that they add to their diet. And the answer to that is do you need to eat any more of, or make sure you're including any particular plant superfood? No, there is no such thing. There's no such thing as a plant superfood. There are some plants that contain nutrients, and some of them we can access to a certain degree. There are some plants that do contain nutrients. But there is no such thing as a molecule that exists in a plant that has special superpowers. Protection of the brain is about subtraction, not about addition. So once you've got your basic needs met with animal foods, everything else about protecting and preserving your brain health is about subtraction, subtracting the things that are causing the inflammation and the oxidative stress in the first place. Your body and your brain contain, and a lot of people don't know this, their own anti-inflammatory and antioxidant systems that are very robust. And if you stay out of their way, give them the things they need and stay out of their way, they will protect you. They will mop up those oxygen-free radicals. They will fight off that inflammation. And you'll have a lot less inflammation and oxidative stress in the first place, because you're not going to be eating foods, garbage is a great word, that are causing all those fires in the first place. You're going to need a lot fewer firefighters if you're not starting the fires in the first place. And beyond that, there's no evidence that superfoods work anyway. They just don't work. All of the studies, there's a whole chapter about this in the book too, where, I make myself, I'm sure, quite unpopular by saying, blueberries not going to save you, dark chocolate's not going to save you, red wine's not going to save you. And I show you how the studies were done and what they actually say. And I hope you'll be as shocked as I was to learn that there's never been a single study showing that eating more of any particular plant superfood does anything good for your health. There's no evidence of that.
So I'm going to add a question to what he said, because I'm wondering about this. Obviously, I think what I'm understanding from what you're saying is meat is food. So meat, fish, poultry, that's food. And then the new question I have is, would adding fat change anything. So should I be the meat with the accompanying, and let's assuming the butcher did a good job, so there's enough fat on there. Like if we do that, does adding even more fat give me something? Because I could see where he maybe could be leaning to that question too, because we see that a lot in carnival channels, that you need to just add that fat and you don't have enough fat, and I'm just wondering, is that a thing?
This is one of those questions, Violet, that I have not been able to get to the bottom of to my satisfaction. So I will say some ideas I have about it, and I will also want to hear your ideas about it because I don't feel like I'm on solid footing on this one, and want to be open with people about that. So fat is complicated because it's not just a source of energy. It also contains nutrients. There are nutrients in fat. There are vital fatty acids in fat and fat soluble vitamins. So there are fat soluble vitamins and there are essential fatty acids in fat. So there are nutrients there that we can't go without. So you don't want to eat a fat-free diet, that's for sure. And if you're going to eat fat, it's important to include animal fats. I feel like I'm very solid footing there. How much fat each one of us needs to eat is really confusing to me. And I think part of it has to do with meeting our energy needs. So some of us have a lot of excess body fat and that we're trying to lose. In those cases, it makes sense to eat less fat or reduce fat so that when you're in this fat burning mode, which you're going to get into with these dietary plans that you talk a lot about and that I've put in the book, when you're in fat burning mode, you want at least some of the fat that you're burning to come from your own body fat. So if you're eating very high amounts, if you're eating too much, whatever that means, too much fat in your diet, then you're going to be burning that fat instead of the fat on your body, and you're not going to be losing the body fat that you're hoping to lose. So there's the energy equation part of it. But let's say that you are at a healthy weight already, or you're trying to gain weight, or you're trying to get pregnant, or you're an athlete and you need a lot more energy. You may feel much better if you increase the amount of fat in your diet. And I honestly don't know. I don't know if I want to say more than that, because I'm not sure if I could say anything more than that that's solid. But I would, if you're open to tossing in your thoughts about this, I would welcome that, because I may not have thought about it in all the ways that I need to be.
I agree with you. I think that for most of my community, the question is coming from the perspective of weight loss. And then there's a confusion that happens at the beginning of a keto lifestyle where we're told, yeah, more fat is better. But if I'm trying to lose weight, I end up in a stall. The reason I think that that causes mental health issues is because life also contributes to mental health issues.
Hmm.
And therefore, when I don't lose weight, but everybody around me does, and I'm like, well, what am I doing wrong? And now I'm beating myself up. And then, of course, I'm going to have a bunch of mental health challenges, which unfortunately either gets me to stop the diet or cheat on the diet or whatever. And so there's a lot of that stuff that I see happening that I think would contribute to that question of like, should we actually be adding fat? I think initially, not necessary. I think unless you're doing lean, don't do lean. That's a bad. That's a mistake.
Exactly.
But I think that when you move forward and you're at goal or even trying to put some weight on, I feel that adding fat in those stories and that at that point it's limited. I think like not excessive is what I'm trying to say, because you need energy. But to your point, all of the activity that fat has in it and this building block too and whatever. So when I'm building, yes, I might need a little extra fat. My body's going to ask for it. This is where I think that stopping to eat when your body tells you to rather than forcing it in is really important. That was my mistake, is that I was stopping eating before my body told me. And that's where I learned that I could eat, but more of everything. It wasn't just fat I added. I added protein, which came with fat, obviously. But I think that we have been trained to eat especially women, been trained to eat as little as possible, right? And what I didn't realize is that I could have eat, which would happen. I ate more and lost weight, which was shocking to my brain. But again, when you give your body what it needs, it does what it's supposed to do, and it puts you where, and right. So that's what I would say about fat is listen to your body first and foremost. If you're eating too much, it's going to let you know. If you're not eating enough, it's going to try to let you know. And you might need to experiment a little bit to figure that out.
Okay, so that's gold because because that is something that I also learned through my own health journey when I was, and I'm not right now, full disclosure, but I was for a long time very strict pure carnivore, meaning, and I've got a lot of food sensitivity, so we're talking really limited diet. It was just meat, seafood, poultry, but with no beef, no pork, no spices, no alcohol, no caffeine, nothing. No, it was just water, salt, meat, seafood, poultry, but with, and no processed meats. And so it was a really limited diet, no dairy, no eggs. When I was eating that way, I knew exactly how much to eat. I never need to. And some days it was a lot, and some days it wasn't very much. It was just my body knew exactly what it needed, and especially when it came to fat. So it is impossible, unless you're eating dairy fat, big caveat there. Dairy fat can kind of mess with your sensors.
Are you including butter when you say that?
I am. But so dairy fat can, for some people, really confuse the signals and make people eat more than they may need. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it's certainly happened to enough of my patients that I know that it can happen. But if you're eating meat, seafood, poultry, eggs, and the fats from those foods, it is, I mean, it's unbelievable. It is impossible to overeat that fat because it's amazing. There is a very clear stop sign. You're like, oh, I'm done. No more. And it's not that you feel sick or anything. It's just this fascinating, very clear biological signal. I am done. I don't need any more. That was such a foreign experience for me from any diet I'd ever been on before. I mean, I'd never experienced that very clear signal. And it was just, oh, I'm done. When I eat dairy, that doesn't happen for me. When I eat a sort of even a more standard ketogenic diet, sometimes my signals aren't as reliable. They're still 1,000 times more reliable than when I'm not. But that degree of your body's intuition, knowing, because you're only giving it what it needs, it doesn't get confused. And I'm convinced that the satiety and the appetite signaling and the energy distribution systems are working optimally. And I mean, what other animal needs to read an ingredient label to know how much to eat without getting fat? I mean, what other animal, needs to read guidelines or, nutrition papers for 15 years to figure out what it's supposed to eat? If you eat the food that's meant for your species and nothing else, then you can just wander around and know what to do. But all of us have been eating, I mean, at least, for most of us for decades, eating stuff that has been blowing past our stop signs, making us hungrier, throwing all of our hormones and neurotransmitters out of balance, and making us feel kind of, crazy and hungry and cravey and unstable from within. So that's a hard life to live. And unless you've experienced it eating a different way, you won't know how tough that life is.
I can definitely say that the difference between eating pork belly, same portion size because I weigh everything, how I could get through a piece of pork belly when I was keto and could only eat about half of it when I was carnivore blew my mind.
Right. Exactly.
And there's something about having vegetation on the plate,
Yes.
and it's crazy to me.
I know. And there is just a world of difference between mostly carnivore and 100 and pure carnivore. There is, even just including a few plants in my diet is very different experience for me than taking all the plants out. And I can't fully explain that. I mean, when I look at the biology, I have some ideas about it, but unless you've compared those two for yourself, I mean, I think most people wouldn't believe it, but it is different. It is different. It's biochemically different.
Now, one thing I want to ask you about, because I know there's a lot of parents and grandparents in my community.
Oh, hello.
We have kids.
Yes.
Yeah. And us with kids, I wish I'd learned this back when my kids were little, but for anybody who has little people around them right now, like we're learning all this information about how, first of all, the seeds are just not good for our health at all. All of this stuff is impacting mental health. So a lot of time what's happening is that I have the people watching who have kids with kids or their own kids that are trying to have a conversation with. How would you lead that? Do you have any clues for them? And
Well,
maybe even just pointing out what are they looking out for to tell if their kid is struggling, because that might help parents.
oh my
If I
gosh,
can see it happening, then I'm going to probably be more quick to work towards fixing it.
yes. So, first, full disclosure, I am not a parent and I'm not a child or adolescent psychiatrist. So I don't have a lot of experience in this area. And my heart goes out, my heart goes out to parents because I don't controlling what children eat, especially when they're going off to school or with their friends or what have you. I can't even imagine how hard that must be. But um, all that being said, I think it's really important for parents, especially even more than for adults. I think it's really important for kids to eat a healthy diet because their brain is still developing. Really, until the early to mid 20s, the brain is still deciding which connections to keep and which connections to throw away, which ones are going to be cemented into place. And you only get one shot at that process. You're really laying the foundation for their mental health future. And the more robust and resilient, the more nutrient rich the diet is, and the health. So the more you nourish, protect, and energize that brain properly as the child is growing, the better job you're doing as a parent to give that kid the strongest possible foundation for every aspect of their life. So it's really important. And it's really, really important to understand that the kind of foods that we think of as foods for children are the most dangerous foods they can eat. So all the cookies and the crackers and the popsicles and the sweetened yogurts and the sodas and the juices and the, oh my gosh, on and on and on, cereals, on and on and on. All of that stuff is so dangerous for kids' brains. And I'm not, this is not an exaggeration, it's causing brain damage. Those foods are causing brain damage. They're causing inflammation, tremendously damaging to the brain's architecture, oxidative stress, tremendously damaging, and insulin resistance. You're gradually impairing your child's ability to use for their brain to make energy. And by so but and over time, over the years, their brain power is declining. And it's the last thing you want. We now have kids with type 2 diabetes, kids with morbid obesity. We have kids with serious mental health issues and serious physical health issues, fatty liver disease, and all kinds of other things because we're feeding them the wrong way. So kids need real food even more than adults do. And that is animal protein, animal fat. And if you're going to include plant foods in the diet, know which ones are the safer, more nutritious ones, and which ones are riskier and more dangerous. And as much as you can, teach that kid by your own example and by everything you do at home to reinforce the healthy food rules at home. You're not going to have total control of the house, but teach them that these are the foods that are going to be good for them. And I don't have any special tips or tricks. unfortunately. But I can tell you there's been a number of studies done. These were done 80s and 90s, mostly in Europe, um, repeated in by different research groups in Europe, and the same outcome with every one. If they took kids with ADHD, attention deficit disorder, right? Some of these kids had such bad ADHD that they required hospitalization because they were so out of control. And they put these kids on what was called a few foods diet, or an oligo-antigenic diet, whatever. It was a diet that was just a small, short list of foods, mostly whole foods, uh, poultry, lamb, vegetables, fruits, and they removed all the added the sort of added sugar. They removed all the chocolate and the nuts and the eggs and the shellfish and all the things that are common allergens in kids, because they thought, well, maybe that might be an issue. And all the processed foods they did include. So there were a few strange things here. They included things like apple juice and rice, because they thought they needed sources of sugars and starches. So they tried to choose the ones that were in their minds the safest. And they also included margarine because they were trying to exclude dairy, because it's an allergen. So a few funny things, but for the most part, it was a really simple, mostly whole foods diet. Within 3 to 4 weeks, 2/3 to 3/4 of those children responded to that diet, and most of them no longer met criteria for ADHD anymore. It's really
That's impressive.
important. It's important. Diet matters. And, so many kids are struggling with what's ADHD, whatever, behavioral issues, social and emotional issues. And yes, some of that's due to our culture and our screens and stress in the world. Yes, but the biology of how the brain is built is fundamental. No matter what else is going on in the kid's life, if they don't have that foundation, they're going to be at at a tremendous disadvantage. And so I don't have a lot of tips or tricks beyond that, unfortunately, but hopefully that's useful.
Absolutely. And I feel like it brings back the idea, once in a while is okay, but we end up doing once in a while every day. And
Yes.
so, therefore, it's no longer once in a while. It's part of my meal plan. And I hope that parents who are watching, the parents, grandparents, that we're trying to treat our kids, but we treat them every single day, and we are damaging their brain. Like you just heard the psychiatrist, Georgia, said it. They're damaging their brain. So we need to stop doing that because it's not helpful for them. It's not helpful for our world in a few years because they're going to be running things. We need them to be smart.
These ultra processed foods are designed by engineers to be addictive and irresistible. They're colorful, they're intensely flavorful. They are not satisfying. You can't, they blow past your stop signs. Kids, if parents understood, that these are addictive and very addictive, brain damaging foods, I mean, I think most parents would do their best to to remove those foods from the home and encourage their child to eat those foods when they're not in the home, because it's the only addictive substance that we sanction for children, and those pathways get cemented. So those bad habits, and when you're eating foods like, I don't know, I shouldn't call them foods, they're not foods. When you're eating, chips and ice cream and soda and chocolate and cookies and cakes and whatever it is, even the sort of natural, like sweetened yogurts and granola bars and fruit juice, all these things, they they make you hungrier, and they leave you feeling unsatisfied. And as you get older, if you're developing really unhealthy attachments to these foods, they can make you feel really bad about yourself. They make you feel out of control. They're unsatisfying. It's like a bad relationship. It's like an abusive relationship. And you're not getting anything out of that food anymore. It has control over you. And it's really painful for people, to try to leave these foods behind. So, and the earlier you start eating those foods, the harder it is when you're older to let go of them. So, you want to really give your kids a fighting chance.
As you were talking, the food that came to mind was trail mix. We have chocolate, we have raisins, we have nuts and seeds, right? It's a perfect combination of kill your kid's brain. That's you giving your kid the good choice. And I feel like, as Elizabeth was asking the question, like, what are we supposed to do? Because we can't abstain from eating altogether, right? And again, that sugar is around us all the time. And I get what you're saying. Like, we can't block our kids. Once they leave the house, they leave the house. But starting at home and teaching them what's good. And I'm also just going to point out that for most of us, we like feeling good.
Yeah.
And if we only have the junky thing once in a while, then when we eat it, we notice. Most of us, when we have one too many drinks and we wake up the next day, we know what caused that and we don't do it again the next time we go out. We don't, our kids are eating this stuff so much that they can't tell. And we need to help them with that. We need to stop giving it to them all the time.
It is, I'm a parent, I'm not a parent, so I can't say this with any authority, but it's really hard for me to sit here and say what parents need to do because I can't imagine how hard it is. But you're a parent. Parenthood comes with responsibilities. And so what does being a good parent mean to you? It's not always easy. Being a parent means, one of my favorite, one of my colleagues, who's a good friend of mine, who is a child psychiatrist, says kids need two things. Being a parent is all, being a good parent is two things: love and limits. Both, not just love, not just limits, love and limits. And it's really that simple. And it's up to you as the parent to decide, where's that line going to be. The kids don't know any better. It's your job to teach them, not just to feed them differently and show them what a food is, what a food isn't, but to model for them by your own example what it looks like to eat healthy and take good care of yourself. So the limits are really important. And even the kids kicking and screaming like, I want this, I want this, I want this. Well, if they wanted alcohol, would you give it to them? If they wanted to go play in traffic, would you let them? I mean, being a parent, I'm sure, is very hard. And I don't envy you, any of you who do this, but that's the job of a parent. You're not always going to be the popular one. You're not always going to be the one that, oh, thank you, you gave me a lollipop, whatever it is. Sometimes you're going to be the one that they're yelling at and crying, and you're not letting me have this or that or the other thing. And if you people say, well, my kid won't eat anything else. Oh, yes, they will. If you don't give them what they want and they refuse to eat, I can't imagine that's going to last more than a day or two. And pretty soon, whatever you have that you're offering is going to be eaten because they're going to get hungry.
I love that because it's so true. And I will throw my hat in the ring to say that my mom, of the sisters and brothers, was the most strict one, and they always wanted to be at my house. So
Really?
somehow, yeah. So it's interesting how kids gravitate to the parent that's going to tell them the right thing.
Kids need and crave guidance and limits. They need to feel those limits there, or they feel very unsure about the world. They
Mhm.
need to do this for them.
I want to go back to the book because you talked about quiet versions of diets we've all heard of. There is paleo, keto, carnivore, but you have quiet versions. Can you help people understand what the quiet version is of? And so let's start with paleo, I guess, and we'll work our way.
So they're kind of standard paleo, keto, and carnivore diets. Those are all fabulously healthier than the standard diet. So even standard paleo, standard keto, standard carnivore, if that's what you want to do and it works well for you, I 100% support you. But if you want to see if there's more possible, if you want to go further, or if those plans haven't worked well enough for you, um, or if you're just curious to know if you could do better, that's why I created these so-called quiet plans. So I've just basically taken the standard paleo, keto, and carnivore plans and modified them by taking out. Remember, protection is about subtraction. Taking out some of the more problematic foods that that bother that that may bother people. So especially people who have immune compromised health or gut health issues or thyroid health issues or mental health problems that haven't responded to other interventions. Or for people who haven't tried any special diets yet before, but they want the fastest, kind of most efficient way to get the most bang for their buck without a lot of trial and error tweaking to the diet later. So it's kind of a faster track. And essentially what I've done, and we talked about this a little before, I took out the flax seeds and I took out the nuts and I took out the seeds and I took out some of the more pungent spices and I took out the cassava root and the star fruit and all the nightshades and, kind of took out and I put limits on cruciferous vegetables and with carnivore, for example, I took out the eggs to see if, for some people, because that's an issue. You can put them back in if you want or need to. And for all the plans, I guess this kind of goes without saying because standard paleo has no dairy. All these plans are dairy free, and so because dairy is just so complicated. So I've modified them in these certain ways, and I've even given suggestions about like even with paleo. The paleo is quieter metabolically because it's a lower carbohydrate version of paleo. Standard paleo allows as many fruits and vegetables. It doesn't put any limits on anything you eat. It gives you, like, here are the foods you can eat and you can eat as much as you want. For most of us with insulin resistance, that's not going to be a plan that brings your insulin and glucose levels into a healthy range. So this is a 90 gram of carbohydrate per day paleo. So it's roughly 30 grams of carb per meal to get those glucose and insulin levels into a healthier place. So it's quieter in that way. And then keto, of course, is much lower. And carnivore is even lower still. So they've got these tweaks to them that in my clinical experience and in my research of my food research tells me that these are the foods that are more likely to bother more people and therefore may be worth experimenting with the removal of.
So what I like is the hallmark of what you're telling me sounds like you're taking out the most aggressive veg and all processed food. Because on the normal keto diet, there's nothing that says you can't have processed food. And I'm understanding that you're saying no.
No, I mean, again, if you're getting benefit from a plain old keto diet, which means a standard ketogenic diet, all that matters really is the ketones, right? So there's lots of different ways of building a ketogenic diet. And if all you're trying to do is get into ketosis and see those ketones on the meter, that will energize your brain differently. And that may bring you benefits regardless of the quality of the diet. Like you can be eating lots of keto junk foods. You can be eating lots of dairy and lots of nuts and you can even make a vegan keto diet that's lots of tofu. I mean, there's lots of different ways to build a ketogenic diet and get into ketosis that may be healthier or less healthy, depending on, like any diet, the health of the diet depends on how you've built it. So yes, you may be in ketosis, but does that mean you're feeling your best? Does that mean it's the healthiest diet for you? I would argue no, that if you're including a lot of processed foods in the ketogenic diet, then, you're still going to have all the risks of those processed foods.
Someone was asking, do I need to go all the way carnivore for that mental health benefit? Or can I do keto, but then I do it quiet? Or each person is different? Trying to figure out.
Yeah, so that is the $1 million question. And so I think that there are a lot of people who will really thrive. I mean, honestly, so some people, when they switch to paleo, that's all they're like, oh my gosh, my depression's gone or my anxiety, whatever it is. Does that mean that they have optimal mental health? Does that mean they could feel even better if they went further? Maybe they could. They then know that they can go deeper if they want to explore that question. Does everybody who goes deeper get benefits? In my experience, many do, but not all. I do have quite a few people who have gone from whole foods keto to carnivore. I'm like night and day. They're like, wow, this is so much better than a ketogenic diet was for me, even though my ketones aren't as high as they were So sometimes you'll see people get benefits from a carnivore diet, even though their ketones aren't quite as high as they were on the ketogenic diet. So it's not just about the ketones, right? It's about the food choices, the foods that you're giving yourself. So theoretically, there's more benefit to be explored as you go deeper into these plans. And that's kind of, I've arranged them this way, kind of a quiet paleo. And then if that doesn't help you enough, you can move to quiet keto. If that doesn't help you enough, you could explore quiet carnivore. Doesn't mean you have to do it in that order, but it's kind of makes sense to kind of think about it that way in terms of the risk benefit analysis. So what I say is, you can draw the line where you want to draw it. You get to decide how far you go. You get to decide what works best for you. But at least you have the information to know which choices make the most sense to explore. Because right now, what most people have for information about brain healthy diets is blueberries, flax seeds, walnuts, Mediterranean diet, eat more whole grains, eat more fruits and vegetables. You're not eating enough fruits and vegetables, more fiber, as much fiber as you possibly can stand. Stop eating red meat. Oh, be careful with saturated fat. Um, Eat more turmeric. People are getting all these incorrect. People say, well, I've tried diet before, it didn't work. That's because you are trying the changes that don't work. And of course, you're going to get frustrated and give up. And of course, you're going to think, well, diet doesn't matter. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. Because the dietary information we've been given is wrong. And so wherever you end up on this spectrum is totally up to you as an individual. Some people need to go all the way to carnivore to feel better. Others don't. But doesn't mean they wouldn't get more benefit by going further down the road. But at least it makes biological sense to think about it. At least this is my opinion, obviously, biological sense to think about it that way.
I'm going to add another wrinkle. Um, I wonder about the fact that sometimes, as we remove things from our diet, our body is going to obviously try to help us by getting better, and the process of getting better releases things back into the system, like oxalate dumping is something we've heard of. I'm assuming that almost any chemical you've eaten can be dumped back in as you lose fat, as you lose weight, and your fat is being broken down. So the other question mark I have for you is, isn't it possible that sometimes going from keto to carnivore, you don't feel as good because you're dumping, and that you might need to make that transition either slower or, yeah, slower. I would probably say slower, but maybe not right now. Maybe let yourself be healthy for a little while and let your body do the cleanup on keto for a while before you try to do that. Because I know in my community, people want to be like from here to A to 0 to 100 immediately because they want to be thin tomorrow. Yes, well, tomorrow, and they're not giving themselves time.
What a great point, Violet. First of all, there's no hurry, and sometimes the slower you go, the more success you're going to have. And also it's really important not to dive headfirst into a keto or carnivore diet, and that because that will be a big shock to your brain and body, and will be unnecessarily uncomfortable and stressful on your system. And so that's another reason why I put the quiet paleo in there first, is because it brings the carbs down to 90. Most for comparison, a standard typical diet contains at least 300 grams of carbohydrate. So paleo is much lower than that. So it kind of eases your system in, gives yourself some time to adjust, get those insulin levels down, get the hormones kind of, find your new equilibrium. And then when you're ready, go to the next level. But yeah, there's no hurry. And the thing about weight loss, I'm glad you mentioned weight loss, because of course, so many people, their main goal, and there's nothing wrong with this, is to look and feel better and lose weight, of course, right? The beautiful thing about these interventions that are metabolically sound, they're the ones that are addressing metabolic health, your glucose and insulin levels, and how your cells operate. The beautiful thing about a metabolically minded diet is that your weight's going to take care of itself. if losing weight is going to be a side effect of improving your metabolic health, and improving your metabolic health is a relatively quick process. So you can lower your triglycerides, your insulin levels, your glucose levels. You can improve the way you can look at all this, your fasting insulin levels, your fasting glucose levels, your hemoglobin A1C, all of those things. You can turn those around and bring them into a normal range within days to weeks if you have the right information. The weight, of course, is going to take longer, but if you are applying these principles correctly, the weight will predictably come down, and you don't even have to worry about it. It's going to happen. Um, a, a family member of mine in her 50s thought that her metabolism was too broken to lose weight. So she's like, well, it just doesn't matter what I do. I can't lose weight. This is somebody who's had bariatric surgery many years ago and thought, well, I can't eat a ketogenic diet because I can't process fat properly. It makes me feel sick because I've had this surgery. I'm just all is lost. And this was somebody who wanted to lose a decent amount of weight. And so we had some conversations, explained how the body works. I say everybody can get into ketosis unless you've got some very rare genetic biochemistry problem, which would have been diagnosed in your infancy. No one's metabolism is too broken to get into ketosis, and no one's metabolism is too broken to lose weight. You just need to know what the rules are, the rules of losing weight. And they're the same rules that are going to help improve your brain health and your heart health and your kidney health and your liver health and everything else. And it's just that you need to know how insulin works. And if you change your diet in a way that brings insulin down to the fat burning point, you will start burning fat and you will generate ketones. Everybody has that in them, that capacity in them. Everybody can burn fat. You just need to know what the rules are. So if you do all these other things that for your short-term health, your weight will follow. And by the way, she lost 60 pounds on a ketogenic diet. And even though she thought her metabolism was too broken to do anything at this age.
I hear that term set weight point all the time. And I'm just like, that doesn't exist. Healthy body regulates its weight. That's just what happens. I say that all the time. It's just what happens. And the problem is that your body's not healthy right now. And that's a great example of it. I think both you and I lived it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we started eating properly and our weight came down. And then I was at goal weight and my weight came down some more without even trying. So it's like your body wants to be healthy and we need to help our body by giving it what it needs to be healthy. We keep messing it up by giving it fun looking stuff. It's fun looking, but it doesn't actually take us anywhere. We eat the stuff and we're hungry 2 hours later and we don't click in. That's weird.
Right. Food is not supposed to make you hungry. Food is supposed to it's not supposed to make you tired. It's not supposed to make you hungry. It's not supposed to make you, desperate and create. Food is supposed to satisfy you and nourish you. And I love what you just said, Violet. You said your body is trying to be healthy. And I've never thought about it like that before, but that's true. Your body is doing everything it knows how to do to get you healthier. And what are we doing? We're throwing monkey wrenches in all on every pathway, sugar and vegetable oils and antibiotics and toxins and flavorings and colorings and emulsifiers, and we're too many toxic foods, and grains and beans. We're giving the body it's just like we're giving it an obstacle course. It's trying its best, but we're not giving it what it needs to thrive. And I love that way of thinking about it. Your body is trying to be healthy and we're getting in its way.
And it's on both fronts, physical and mental.
Yes.
That's why our mind points us at the problem. That's why we feel bad about the problem, but we refuse to solve the problem and we self-soothe with food. So on all levels, we need to learn to listen to what our body is putting in front of us, whether it's physical or mental, like look at the problem and solve it. And part of solving it is reading books like yours and also taking the course that I took. Well, I mean, I can take it, but I want you to tell us. Can you please tell us something? I'm really excited to know this. What kind of professionals are you getting in there? And one of the questions that I got from my community is like, can we look forward to there being more psychiatrists, doctors, etc., knowing this information and helping it? Like, Georgia, please, like, let us know a little bit. How is that going? How many? How do you project that to be? Like, can we be happy about this 5 years, 10 years from now?
We can be ecstatic because it is, it's, this field is exploding. It's spreading rapidly. The research, the science is growing faster than I can keep. I mean, every time I teach this course, I'm teaching another group starting tonight. I teach 4 or 5 of these small live groups every 2 months or so. And every time I run these groups, I have to update the science module because there are so many new studies coming out every month now. And there are so many practitioners of different stripes. Everything from MD psychiatrists to psychiatric nurse practitioners to primary care doctors to physician's assistants to psychologists to social workers, counselors, health coaches, just all kinds of different practitioners, dietitians and nutritionists who take there are so many people interested in taking the course, we can barely keep up with the requests at this point. And this is a really good problem to have. And so I think it's, the situation is looking really, really hopeful. So there are now hundreds and hundreds of clinicians around the world who use these metabolic strategies in their practice to help people with mental health conditions. I have a free clinician directory you can search if you're looking for somebody, if somebody out there's looking for someone to work with. It's growing every week. And we've got whole clinics now requesting the training. There've been a number of clinic-wide trainings that I've done, which is fantastic because there are now whole systems, healthcare systems, that are instituting a metabolic psychiatry program or track or option for patients in various places around the world. So it's a really exciting time to be a mental health practitioner because for 75 years, it felt to me that the field was essentially standing still. And now it's really taking a quantum leap forward. I mean, it's so, what we're seeing, the results we're seeing are really unprecedented. There's just so much hope and so much interesting research going on, and so many clinicians who are excited about offering new strategies, incorporating this into their work that, I mean, I think it's a fantastic time to be in this field.
Can you talk about your book for a minute so that we can? I want people to read this book. They need to read this book. It's going to be linked below.
The reason I wrote the book was because most people think they've tried everything and they've given up hope. And I want people to know that there are so many things you haven't tried that could help you in a matter of days to weeks, even if you've been on medications for years, even if you've been in and out of the hospital, even if you have a so-called diagnosis of a serious mental illness. Even if you've tried dietary strategies before, there are just lots of new strategies for you to try that are laid out in this book, and including meal plans and recipes and everything else, if that floats your boat. So that there's a lot of practical information. And the other thing about the book, and there's stories and there's case studies and all kinds of other things, it teaches you how to use home glucose monitoring to get your metabolism under control, which lab tests to get all this other stuff. But the other half of the book is about nutrition myths and helping people let go of some of the beliefs about nutrition that are standing in the way, standing in between between them and good mental health. So I did feel like I had to explain that because there are so many, well, what about, isn't red meat bad for you? Don't we need whole grains? Don't I need all my fruits and vegetables? Don't I need colorful plants? Isn't fat bad for me? And on and on and on. So that's all in there too. But the practical stuff is there for people who, like one of my friends said, just tell me what to do. There's definitely sections in the book about that too, if you're not interested in the in all the science. But I wrote it to be useful for practitioners as well as for everyday people. So I hope people will find it a useful resource.
I absolutely found it very practical and not above my head. And I feel like the part where you're saying like people asking, tell me what to do, quality information is what's going to help us to do what we need to do everywhere. And that's what you've given. So it's like, it's really amazing, this book, because it just, like I said, it opened my eyes to so many places.
Thank you so much, Violet. That really is coming from you a high compliment. I really am so glad that you found the book useful, that you find it useful in your work, and that you found it worth your time to read. Again, you're a high information reader, and so that for you to feel like it was worthwhile is music to my ears. So thank you.
Georgia, I'm so happy that you came by and did this, and I would love to have you on again because this was. I still have questions, but I know that it's been 2 hours, so I want to respect your time. But can you just talk a little bit about how people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, so thank you for recommending the book. And it is the way to find out more about it is on my website. I have a website, and the website's called diagnosisdiet.com. Or if you just plug my name into a search engine, Georgia Ede website, it will come up. And one of the tabs on the website is the free clinician directory. Another tab on the website is the training program. If you're a clinician of any kind who wants to take the program, either live or as a recorded self-paced thing. And there's also a tab on the website about the book, so you can learn more about the book. And you can see, and of course, wherever you like to buy books, you'll find it. I like to recommend bookshop.org because they support independent booksellers, but you can buy the book wherever you like to buy books, and it's an audio book and digital and everything else. It's being translated into a bunch of other languages, which is really exciting too.
I'm going to link to anything that you give me down below. Wellness Warriors, I hope you got a lot out of this interview because Georgia's amazing. And, click on the screen to watch the video that's coming next. I'll talk to you guys again next week.
Thanks so much, Violet, and nice to meet you, everybody. Have a good day.